The silence didn't start the day I moved. It started long before that, quietly, like mold in a corner no one checks until the wall collapses. And when I finally walked away, I thought they would at least notice the empty space I left behind. I thought someone would call, even if it was just to ask where the spare key was. But weeks became months, and months became a full year. No one reached out. Not my father, not my stepmother, not my stepsister. Nothing. And the worst part? It didn't feel like a breakup. It felt like I had been erased, like I had never been a person in that house. Only a role, a function, a pair of hands. My name is Maren Caldwell. I was in my early 30s when everything broke open, but at the time this story began, I still thought loyalty could earn love if I worked hard enough. I worked as a financial forensic auditor, which is a polite way of saying I found the truth inside numbers people lie with. I traced embezzlement that hid behind consulting fees. I rebuilt shattered timelines from bank statements and cash withdrawals. I sat in conference rooms with lawyers and executives and said things like, "This isn't a mistake, it's a pattern." At work, people were careful around me. At home, people treated me like a household appliance. I lived in Ohio, in a clean, small apartment that smelled like eucalyptus cleaner and quiet. My job was based out of a national firm with a satellite office downtown, and I was good enough that senior partners handed me files they didn't want to touch. The kind with missing invoices, the kind with someone's career hanging off the edge. I didn't flinch, not at work, but every weekend. I drove 40 minutes out to the suburbs, like a prisoner returning to the same cell because my father lived there. And my stepmother made sure I never forgot that family came with obligations. The house had that permanent staged look-neutral throw pillows, a fake bowl of lemons, and a smell like overpriced candles that never fully covered the odor of resentment. My father, Darren, had once been loud, warm, present, but over time he shrank into a quieter man. Like someone had turned the volume knob down and then snapped it off. He spent most of his days in one chair, watching sports, repeating the same opinions to the television like it was listening. My stepmother, Renee, was not quiet. Renee had a voice that could soften into honey in public and harden into steel in private. She moved through that house like the homeowner of my soul, like she held the deed. And then there was my stepsister, Talia. Talia was the kind of woman who posted inspirational quotes about manifesting abundance while privately living on overdraft fees and borrowed money. She was in her mid-30s, and she changed careers the way other people changed phone cases. Every 6 months, she launched something new, a boutique, a podcast, a skincare brand, a coaching program, always one step away from blowing up, always one disaster away from needing someone to rescue her. And that someone was always supposed to be me, because I was the stable one, the responsible one, the one who didn't make noise, the one who didn't ask for anything. So the system built around that. Saturday mornings, I did grocery runs for a house I didn't live in. Not because they couldn't, because it was easier to let me do it. I would push a cart down Bright Isles Chicken, produce detergent buying food I didn't eat, brands I didn't like, snacks I'd never choose. Then I'd unload everything into Renee's kitchen, while she hovered, sipping something cold, giving me directions like I was a contractor. Get the good butter, not that cheap kind. Make sure you get the snacks the boys like. Oh, and if you're going to buy meat, don't get the fatty cuts. The boys were Talia's kids, 2 little hurricanes with sticky hands and loud voices, raised to believe Aunt Maren existed to clean up what they dropped. By noon, I'd be chopping vegetables, marinating chicken, boiling pasta, scrubbing pans, while Renee floated through with her phone to her ear and her eyes on my effort, like she was grading it. And my father? My father would look up only when a plate appeared. "Thanks, kiddo," he'd say, as if gratitude was supposed to cover what love didn't. Every time I tried to talk about my career, Renee responded like I was describing accounting homework. "Oh, Marin, that sounds exhausting. That's a lot of numbers. And do you even enjoy that kind of work?" It always landed the same way, like my life was a boring background hum, like the only thing interesting about me was what I could provide. At work, people treated me like a scalpel. At home, they treated me like a mop. And I tolerated it for too long because I kept hoping one day, just one day, they would see me, not as utility, as a daughter, as a woman, as someone worth celebrating. That hope is what made the next part hurt so much, because I had news, real news, not drama, not a launch, not a vibe shift. The kind of news that changes your life. My firm had been investigating a mid-level executive at a regional manufacturing company who was suspected of siphoning funds through fake vendors. They'd lost hundreds of thousands, maybe more. Every department blamed another. Legal said the evidence was thin. The CEO wanted it buried. The board wanted a scapegoat. And the partner overseeing the case had been stuck for months. They handed the file to me like a hot stone. "See if you can find anything." I did. I found a pattern no one wanted to see. A vendor that didn't exist. Invoices that repeated in identical increments. Round dollar transfers timed right before holidays. I traced it to a family member of the executive shell company, passive income, clean on paper. I built a timeline, a flow map, and a narrative so tight there was nowhere for anyone to hide. And when I presented it, the room went quiet, not the dismissive kind of quiet, the scared kind, the kind that says, "Oh, she's right." That case cracked open and turned into a multi-state civil fraud investigation. And my firm? They loved it. Not because they cared about justice, but because it meant leverage, contracts, reputation, and expansion. 2 weeks later, I was called into a meeting with a senior partner and HR. They slid a paper across the table. A promotion, a jump in title, a jump in salary, a new role with more authority, and a relocation. A new office was being built up in a different region, new clients, bigger cases, larger institutions. They wanted me there. They didn't ask. They offered. And the offer was the first time in my life I felt chosen for what was inside me, not what I could do for other people. I walked out of that meeting with my hands shaking, not from fear, from excitement. I sat in my car outside the office and just stared forward, the steering wheel under my palms. Breathing like I had just escaped underwater, I called no one, not because there was no one, because I didn't want to hear anyone try to shrink it. I didn't want Renee to say, "Oh, so more spreadsheets." I didn't want Talia to say, "That's cute." I didn't want my father to grunt and ask me to pass the potatoes. But I still went over that Saturday because the old system was still installed in my bones. I told myself, this time will be different. I told myself, if I walk in with good news, they'll respond like a family. I arrived with groceries cutting into my fingers, the familiar weight of responsibility, and I stepped into the house like someone stepping onto a stage where the audience had already decided what role you were allowed to play. The TV was loud, the kids were louder. Renee was in the living room, phone in hand, laughing into it. My father's chair was angled toward the screen like a shrine. I stood in the doorway and cleared my throat. "I have amazing news," I said, forcing brightness into my voice. My father grunted. Renee waved vaguely without looking. "It was fine," I told myself. "Dinner. I'll tell them at dinner." So I cooked. I cooked like I always did, because my hands didn't know how to stop being useful. I roasted. I seasoned. I timed everything perfectly. I cleaned as I went. I made a dessert from scratch, because Talia always talked about my sweet tooth, like she was the only one allowed to enjoy comfort. Talia arrived late, as usual, flustered, loud, already filming herself. She walked through the front door with her phone held up like a microphone. "Hey, besties," she said to her screen. "We're at my mum's house and there's food. Thank God." She didn't even look at me. She didn't say hello. She just panned the camera over the kitchen like it was content, like my effort was decor. We finally sat down. My father turned the TV down just enough to hear the chewing. The boys dropped food onto the floor. Renee cut their chicken into tiny pieces like she was feeding royalty, and I cleared my throat. "So," I began, smiling too hard, "I got a promotion." Renee didn't even pause. "Oh, that's nice, Marin." I waited. Nothing. "It's a major role," I added. "They're moving me to a new region." My father reached for his drink and said, "Pass the bread." Talia was scrolling. I could feel that familiar heat behind my eyes, the sting of being invisible. "I'm relocating," I said again louder. "I'm moving out of Ohio." That should have been a moment. A parent should have asked, "Where? When? Are you okay?" A sister should have said, "Oh my God, congratulations." Instead, Talia's phone made a loud pinging sound. She gasped dramatically, then squealed. "Oh my God," she shrieked. "My post hit 100,000 views." And the table exploded. My stepmother stood up like Talia had just won an Oscar. My father smiled for the first time all day. Renee hugged her daughter. "My baby," she said. "I knew you would blow up." They started talking over each other about algorithms and followers and brand deals Talia didn't actually have. Renee pulled out a bottle of something sweet and fizzy she kept hidden for celebrations. They clinked glasses. They toasted. They laughed. And my promotion, my relocation, my entire life shift disappeared like smoke. I sat there, holding my fork, watching them celebrate something that meant absolutely nothing in the real world. And then, like the universe wanted to stamp the humiliation into me, Renee glanced down at the mess under the kids' chairs. Her eyes didn't meet mine. Her voice was casual. "Marin, honey, can you get that? They made such a mess for you." For me, like the mess, was a gift, like I should be grateful for the chance to clean it. My jaw tightened so hard my teeth ached. I didn't say a word. I stood, picked up a towel, went down on my knees and wiped the floor while they kept talking above me like I wasn't there. I could feel tears threatening, but I refused to give them that. I finished cleaning, packed leftovers into containers, washed the dishes. My father didn't even turn around to say goodbye properly. Renee told me to drive safe, like she was dismissing a delivery driver. I walked out with my shoulders stiff, got into my car, and drove back to my apartment in silence so loud it felt like pressure in my skull. When I got home, my place was spotless, quiet, small, mine, and for the first time, I didn't feel relief. I felt something colder, something cleaner. Rage, not explosive rage, a forensic kind. The kind that doesn't scream. The kind that documents. I opened the family group chat. It had been quiet, mostly Renee posting pictures of the boys, Talia posting links to her latest launch, and my father occasionally sending thumbs-up emojis like that counted as love. I typed, "I'm moving next month. I'm leaving Ohio." I hit send. Then I watched the little scene marks pop up. 1, 2, 3. They saw it. All of them. And then nothing. No calls. No. "Where are you going?" No. "Are you okay?" No. "Congratulations." Nothing. An hour later, the chat lit up again. My heart did that stupid, hopeful leap anyway, because trauma trains you to chase crumbs like they're meals. It was a photo from Renee, a picture of the dessert I'd made, a slice removed, her caption, "Celebrating Talia's big moment, so proud of my girl." And then Talia reacted with hearts. My father reacted with a thumbs up. They were congratulating each other using my labour as the centrepiece for a celebration that had erased me. That was the moment something in me switched off. Not my love, my compliance, my willingness, my participation. I didn't cry. I didn't respond. I muted the chat. Then I opened my laptop and started searching for apartments in my new state. A week later, I signed the lease. 2 weeks later, I gave notice, and the entire time, no one asked. Not once. It was like the family machine didn't notice a part had been removed until it tried to run and something jammed. The day I left, the moving truck arrived early. I walked through my apartment doing final checks, closets empty, cabinets empty, keys in hand, and my phone rang. Renee. I answered out of reflex. "Maren," she said immediately, voice sharp. "I need you to come get the boys this weekend. Talia has an event, and I can't do it alone." I stood in my empty living room, surrounded by echoes. "I can't," I said. A pause. "What do you mean you can't?" Renee snapped. "It's Saturday." "I'm leaving," I said. "The truck is here. I'm moving." Silence. Then a sharp inhale, offended, shocked, like I'd broken a rule of physics. "You're really doing this," she whispered. "I told you," I said calmly. "You read it." And then, click, she hung up on me. I stared at the phone like it was a dead insect. Then I slid it into my pocket and walked outside. The truck pulled away. I followed it onto the highway, and somewhere past the last familiar exit sign, I realized something that made my throat tighten. They weren't silent because they missed me. They were silent because they didn't think they had to try. They thought I would come back like a boomerang. Because I always had 2 hours into the drive, my phone buzzed. A text from my father. "What do you mean you're leaving?" That was it. Not, "Are you safe?" Not, "I'm proud." Not, "I'm sorry." Just confusion. Because the appliance had walked away, I didn't answer. I muted him too. And I drove until the landscape changed, until the air felt different, until the sky opened wider over unfamiliar roads. I moved to a different state, into a temporary furnished place that smelled like hotel detergent and new beginnings. And on my first morning there, I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, coffee in my hand, and I whispered out loud, "Here, I'm not the default." No one replied, because no one was there. And for the first time, that didn't feel lonely. It felt like oxygen. My new office was in a bigger city, with sharper people and faster systems. The kind of place where nobody cared who your family was. They cared if you could deliver. I walked into my first meeting, introduced myself, and someone said, "We've heard about your work." It was a simple sentence, but it landed like a miracle. Because I had lived in a house where no one ever said that. Weeks became months. Months became a year, then more. And that's when I realized something that made my chest go strangely hollow. The silence wasn't temporary. It was permanent. Holidays came and went. My birthday passed. Not one call, not one apology, not one, "How are you?" It was like they had deleted me the moment I stopped being useful. And I would have accepted that. I would have built my new life quietly, privately, untouched. If one thing hadn't happened, one small, innocent thing, a photograph. It was taken by my father's sister, my aunt, the only person in that family who ever looked at me like I was a human being. She visited me on a layover, saw my new place, saw how calm my life was, saw how different I looked, heavier in the good way, steadier, healthier, and before she left, she asked gently, "Do you mind if I take a picture? Just the view. My friend is redecorating, and this is beautiful." I hesitated. Something in me warned me, but she was the only one who hadn't harmed me. So I said yes. She took one photo, just one, and later that night, she posted it with a proud caption, "Not thinking," not realizing she had just turned on a light. And somewhere back in that old system, Renee saw it. Talia saw it. My father saw it. And suddenly the silence didn't feel like peace anymore. It felt like the moment right before a predator moves. Because when people like them see proof you're thriving, they don't feel happy. They feel entitled. And that was the night the first message came through. Not love, not apology. A sudden sweetness, a sudden warmth, a sudden suspicious interest in my life. And the next morning, I got the text that made my blood run cold. "Honey, we miss you so much. We're flying in. We land tomorrow." The message sat on my screen like a legal threat pretending to be affection. "Honey, we miss you so much. We're flying in. We land tomorrow." No question mark, no request. Just an announcement like my life was still a shared calendar they could edit without permission. I stared at the text long enough for my coffee to go cold. My first instinct was old and automatic. How do I prepare? Do I clean more? Do I buy food? Do I make space? Then a newer voice, quieter but sharper, cut through. "Why would you prepare for people who never prepared for you?" I didn't reply. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. Silence had been their weapon. Now it was mine. They landed the next day. I knew because my phone buzzed with a follow-up text while I was in a meeting, calmly dismantling a falsified expense trail for a regional bank. "We're here! So excited to see you!" Still no question. Still no permission. I finished my workday like nothing was wrong because nothing was wrong. The storm hadn't hit yet. It was still offshore. I drove home slowly, taking the long way, letting my thoughts line up like evidence on a table. I had changed states, changed routines, changed boundaries. But I hadn't yet changed them, and they were about to test whether the old rules still applied. I arrived home just as the sun dipped behind the buildings. My place was modest but intentional. Clean lines, quiet colors, nothing flashy, nothing performative. It wasn't meant to impress. It was meant to protect. A knock came less than an hour later. Not tentative, not polite. 3 sharp taps, like someone who believed the door would open because it always had. I stood still for a moment. Then I opened it. Renee was in front, arms already spreading into a hug that assumed permission. "Oh, Marin," she said, breathy and loud. There's my girl. She leaned in. I stepped back. Her arms closed around Air. The flicker of irritation crossed her face so fast she probably thought I hadn't seen it. Behind her stood my father, holding a paper bag like an offering, and behind him Talia, phone already in hand, camera already angled. Guys, she said to her screen, voice syrupy, we're finally seeing my sister after so long. Family reunion. I felt my stomach drop. No, I said. Just that, one word. They froze. What? Talia laughed nervously, still filming. No filming, I said calmly. Not here. Renee's smile tightened. Oh, she's just sharing with her followers. It's harmless. It's not happening, I replied. Turn it off or leave. That was new. They could feel it. The shift. Talia hesitated, then rolled her eyes dramatically and lowered the phone. For God's sake, she muttered. You've changed. Yes, I said. I have. I stepped aside and let them in, not because they deserved it, but because I wanted to see something. I wanted to see how quickly the old instincts kicked in. They walked through my place slowly, too slowly. Renee's eyes scanned the furniture, the floors, the windows. She wasn't admiring. She was calculating. This is nice, she said, voice careful. Very minimalist. My father sat down without asking. Same habit, same entitlement. Talia wandered, touching things she didn't own. How much does a place like this cost out here? She asked casually. There it was. Not how are you? Not you look good. Numbers. Appraisal. I didn't answer. I poured myself water and leaned against the counter. Why are you here? I asked. Renee exchanged a glance with Talia, then sighed like she was about to deliver sad news. Well, she began, we've just been worried about you. I raised an eyebrow. Really? Yes, she said quickly. You disappeared. You didn't call. You didn't come back for holidays. You didn't call me, I replied. Silence. My father shifted in his seat. Renee waved a hand. You know how things get. Life happens. Life happened for me too, I said. That's why I left. Talia scoffed. You didn't have to cut us off. I didn't, I said calmly. I stopped showing up uninvited. Her mouth opened, closed. That was strike one. Renee changed tactics. She sat down across from me, folded her hands, softened her voice. We're proud of you, Marin. Truly, we always knew you'd do well. The lie was smooth. Practiced. I let it sit, then asked, why now? That's when the real reason walked into the room. Talia's jaw tightened. Renee's eyes flicked to my father. My father cleared his throat. There's a situation, he said quietly. Of course there was. Renee leaned forward. Talia's been under a lot of stress. Talia jumped in. It's not my fault. The market's insane. Everyone's struggling. I nodded slowly. What happened? I asked. They relaxed just a little. The trap had opened. Talia launched into it. A storefront lease. A partner who backed out. Inventory that didn't sell. Fees. Late penalties. Short-term loans with long-term consequences. She spoke fast, emotional, defensive, like someone who'd rehearsed this speech in front of a mirror. Renee nodded along, adding sympathetic sighs. My father stared at the floor. And now, Renee concluded gently, things have snowballed. I waited. She waited for me to ask how much. I didn't. So Talia blurted it. It's not even that much, she said. Just under 50. There it was. The number floating between us like a demand wearing a dress. And you came here, I said slowly. Because? Renee smiled. Because family helps family. I laughed, not loudly, not cruelly, just a single breath of disbelief. You didn't speak to me for over a year, I said. You ignored my move. You ignored my job. You ignored my life. That's not fair, Renee snapped. You're right, I said. It's not. Talia crossed her arms. So you're just going to sit there and judge me? No, I said. I'm going to ask you a question. She rolled her eyes. Fine. Did I cause this debt? No. Did I sign anything? No. Did you ask me for advice before making these decisions? Silence. I nodded. Then this isn't my problem. Renee's face hardened. You really are cold now. No, I said. I'm clear. She leaned back, offended. After everything we did for you? I tilted my head. Name one thing. Her mouth opened, closed. My father whispered, Marin. I held up a hand. No, I said. I'm not doing this again. Talia stood abruptly. So that's it? You're just going to let us drown? You're not drowning, I replied. You're experiencing consequences. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. You think you're better than us now? I think I'm done being used. The room went silent. Renee stood too. Her voice dropped dangerously calm. You know, she said, you wouldn't even have this life if it weren't for family. I smiled. That's when I knew. They still thought they owned the narrative. They still believed whatever I had belonged to them. And that meant this wasn't over. Not even close. Because people like Renee don't walk away when they smell money. They escalate. They plan. They invade. And as they left that night hugless, stiff, offended, I watched Renee glance once more around my place. Not with anger, with intent. That's when I understood the real danger wasn't the debt. It was curiosity. And curiosity mixed with entitlement always comes back armed. The next morning, I got a text from Renee. Sweet, polite, deadly. We're staying a little longer. Thought we'd come by later. There's something important we need to talk about. I stared at the screen. Then I opened my laptop. Because when people start circling your life like vultures, you don't run, you prepare. And this time, I wasn't defending an audit. I was about to close one. The morning they came back, I didn't feel fear. I felt focus. That's how I knew I was different now. Fear is loud. Focus is quiet. I woke before my alarm, the way I always did, on days when something important was about to break. I made coffee. Black. No sugar. I stood by the window of my apartment and watched the city wake up. Cars threading through streets like veins filling with blood. Renee's text replayed in my mind. We're staying a little longer. Thought we'd come by later. There's something important we need to talk about. Important. That word had always meant one thing in my old life. You're needed. I opened my laptop. Not to look for flights. Not to rehearse excuses. Not to plan an escape. I opened a folder. It wasn't labeled family. It was labeled containment. People assume financial forensic auditors only investigate other people's messes. What they don't realize is that once you spend years dismantling fraud, you start building your own life the same way institutions do, layered, compartmentalized, hardened against emotional exploitation. 2 years earlier, when I left Ohio, I had made a decision I never told anyone about. Not my firm, not my aunt, not even the few friends who knew parts of my story. I had stopped putting assets in my own name. Because names are leverage. Ownership is vulnerability. Structures are protection. My phone buzzed while I was reviewing documents. A call from my father. I let it ring, then stop. Then ring again. I answered on the third attempt. Marin, he said immediately, voice strained. We're heading over. I'm working, I replied calmly. Renee's voice cut in from the background. It won't take long. It will, I said, and I'm not available. Silence. Then her tone shifted. You don't have to be difficult. I'm not, I said. I'm being precise. That annoyed her more than anger ever could. We'll talk later, she snapped, and the line went dead. I closed my laptop, not because I was done, because everything was already in place. They didn't come to my apartment again. That would have required respecting the last boundary I'd drawn. Instead, they waited. 3 days passed. No contact. Then my phone lit up with a notification from an unknown number. A picture. No text. Just an image. It was water clear, endless blue, a dock, palm shadows stretching across white stone. I stared at it for a long time. Then the message underneath loaded. Didn't know you had this kind of life now. Renee. My chest didn't tighten. My pulse didn't jump. I just exhaled. So that's how they found it. Not through me, not through conversation, through curiosity, through snooping, through the same method they'd always used, circling, until something valuable revealed itself. The island had never been a secret. It just hadn't been advertised. I typed back one sentence. It's not what you think. Her reply came instantly. Then explain it. I didn't, because explanations are invitations. Instead, I got another text, this time from Talia. So, when were you planning to tell us about the island? There it was. Not if. When? I put my phone down and finished my coffee. They didn't ask to visit. They told me they were already nearby. Apparently, they'd rented a place just for a few days. Apparently, they'd love to see it. Apparently, it was time to reconnect properly. I said nothing, because I knew what they didn't. You don't arrive at a private island. You're cleared. And the people who do the clearing don't answer to family guilt. They answer to contracts. The morning they showed up, I wasn't there. I watched them on a screen. The island had one access point, a dock monitored by a small security office, and 2 men who didn't care about sob stories. Renee stepped off the boat first. She was wearing sunglasses too large for her face, and a smile stretched tight with expectation. Behind her came my father, looking smaller than I remembered, and Talia, phone in hand, already filming. They walked forward confidently, like people who believed the world opened when they knocked. They didn't see the cameras. They didn't hear the click as audio activated. The guard stepped forward. Names? He asked. Renee smiled brightly. We're family. The guard didn't smile back. I need names. She gave them. He typed, paused, typed again, then looked up. I'm sorry, he said evenly. You're not on the access list. Renee laughed. That's impossible. My stepdaughter owns this. No, the guard replied. She doesn't. And Talia's head snapped up. Excuse me. The guard turned the screen toward them. This property is held by a trust, he said. Beneficiaries do not grant access. Trustees do. Renee's smile faltered. Well then call her, she said sharply. We're expected. The guard shook his head. She's aware you're here. I was. I watched Renee's face shift through disbelief, irritation, then something close to panic. My father stepped forward. Marin? He called out uselessly, as if I were hiding behind a palm tree. Talia scoffed. This is ridiculous. She's clearly trying to punish us. The guard lifted a hand. Ma'am, you need to step back from the dock. Renee's voice rose. We flew all this way. The guard didn't move. She's being cruel, Renee snapped. After everything we've done, that's when I decided it was time. I tapped a button. The screen split. My face appeared on the small monitor mounted beside the dock. Renee froze. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. Marin, she breathed, voice suddenly sweet. There you are, I smiled. Not warmly, not coldly, professionally. You shouldn't be here, I said. Talia immediately lifted her phone. Guys, this is insane. The feed cut instantly. The guard took one step forward. No recording. Renee spun on him. She can't do this. Yes, I said calmly through the speaker. I can. My father finally spoke. Why? He asked quietly. Why would you shut us out like this? I looked at him through the camera. Because he deserved the truth more than the others. Because you didn't come to see me, I said. You came to see what I had. Silence. Renee recovered first. Her voice sharpened. Don't be dramatic. We're worried about Talia. You know she's struggling. I know, I said. And this doesn't solve it. She stepped closer to the edge of the dock. So what? She snapped. You're just going to hoard all this? The word landed exactly how it sounded. Hoard. I tilted my head slightly. This island, I said, is not an asset you can liquidate. It's not collateral. It's not a backup plan. Talia sneered. Everything has a price. I smiled again. Not this. Renee's voice dropped. Dangerous and urgent. Then sell it. There it was. The sentence they had travelled for. The reason behind every smile, every fake concern. Sell it, she repeated. Help your family. Just this once. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't react. I simply said, I can't. She scoffed. You won't. I can't, I repeated. Legally. That stopped her. What do you mean legally? The trust, I said, is irrevocable. My father frowned. Marin, the island doesn't belong to me, I continued. I'm a beneficiary. I don't control sale, leverage, or transfer. Talia's face drained of colour. So, what? She whispered. It's just sitting there? Yes, I said. Protected. Renee's breath came faster. So you built all this? She said, voice trembling. And none of it can help us? I shook my head slowly. No, I said. I built it so it couldn't. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't stunned. It was hollow. My father looked at the water. Talia looked furious. Renee looked small for the first time. There was nothing she could demand. No angle. No guilt strong enough to crack legal structure. No way in. She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red. You've abandoned us, she whispered. I felt no urge to argue. No, I said. I stopped bleeding. My father looked up. Is there anything you're willing to do? He asked. I nodded. Yes. Hope flickered on Renee's face. Then I finished. I'll help you find professionals, advisors, counselors, people who deal with reality. Renee's jaw tightened. No money, no access, I said. No control. Talia laughed bitterly. So we flew all this way for nothing? No, I replied. You came for clarity. The guard stepped forward again. You need to leave. Renee hesitated. Then turned toward the water, toward the island, toward the life she thought she could claim. And in that moment, she finally understood something she never had before. This wasn't a place she could walk into. It was a system she could never breach. She turned back toward the boat. My father lingered. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. It didn't fix anything, but it was real. I nodded once. That was all. They left. The boat pulled away. The dock emptied. The cameras kept recording until the water swallowed them. I turned off the feed, and for the first time in my life, I felt something settle. Not victory, not revenge, stability. Later that night, I stood barefoot on my balcony back in the city, watching the lights below. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Renee. "I don't recognize you anymore." I typed back, "That's the point." Then I blocked the number. I went inside, closed the door, and slept better than I ever had. Because the island wasn't my escape. It was my proof that when you stop being the default, people who only loved your usefulness can no longer reach you. And that silence, this time, it was chosen.